Last night, Abby Phillips had her regular news night roundtable, and the conversation turned to America's lack of trust in our media. And again, I don't know why CNN would host this conversation, because it ain't going to end well for them. But they brought on this guy. He's a Jeff Jarvis. He is he's a journalism professor. So understand that almost all the journalists that you read right now, Washington Post, New York Times, or you see on television, they probably went through his classroom or went through a program that he designed and is replicated at the top journalism schools in America: Northwestern, Syracuse, USC, what have you. So they brought him on to talk about why Americans don't trust journalists anymore. They brought on the guy who's created the very journalists who have lost that trust. So yeah, okay, I'm interested to hear his opinion. And then we'll hear Scott Jennings' opinion.
The problem is that the right wing, hello, Scott, has taken advantage of this situation, I think, quite cleverly, quite wisely. They've played into a weakness.
What situation?
The situation of media being under attack. And so they've created a situation where...
You've almost got it. Keep going. What the right wing is taking advantage of is finally the American people saying enough is enough. They're tired of feeling like the mass media screens out one viewpoint versus another in political coverage. They're tired of media institutions favoring one party over another. They're tired of narratives over factual stories. If I had any advice for 60 Minutes or anybody else, it would be just cover the news and try to be fair about it and stop putting your finger on the scale, especially during campaigns.
You're talking about the old mass media myth that you could have this thing that was in the middle. The Walter Cronkite saying, that's the way it is, when it wasn't for many Americans the way it was. When people were pissed off.
But people back in those days trusted the media, did they not?
No, they just couldn't be heard because there was no two-way. Now we have the internet.
Look at the Gallup polling. It was here, and now it's here. It's fallen off of a cliff.
Yeah, we do have that Gallup polling about trust in media, and now, as in recent years, and let's be honest, Scott, a lot of this is driven by the rhetoric on your side of the aisle. I mean, it's not.
You think it's driven by the rhetoric and not the performance?
Absolutely.
But my point is this: if you're CBS or any other news outlet, the reason that you have lost trust ought to be obvious to you, and the way to fix it also ought to be obvious to you. And it has nothing to do with Donald Trump and everything to do with the product. Just try to make a better product that appeals to more people. And the way you appeal to more people is by not crapping on half or more than half of the country because of their values and political viewpoints.
I think that is
what you'd end up with in that press room then is, and these are my words, the freak show that you had Trump wants. Trump tries to devalue media. Why should we value his freak show there? Leave it to the freaks.
I think calling them freaks.
I don't think there's any disagreement on that, by the way.
I mean, he called these new media sources the freak show. They're not freaks. They have audiences.
Some of them are.
They have audiences, and there's a reason that they're thriving is because the people are starved for information that they think they can trust. They're not freaks. They're filling a need in this country, in my opinion.
All right. That was fantastic. And we're going to break it down because there's three distinct segments there that I want to comment on. But what you just saw there, you probably smelled it through your viewing screen here. That was the elitism. That was the elitism of the hierarchy of the credentialed class in America that is best represented by journalists in Washington, D.C. and Manhattan. At every turn, this guy who, if you ask him, he'll tell you over drinks that he's smarter, in his opinion, than 99.9% of the rest of this country, is completely clueless about what's going on with that 99.9% of this country. Absolutely clueless. He came close, as Scott Jennings just said. But let's break this down and give a little analysis here, because I know that you love the media that's smart. I know that you love a media that's truthful and honest and real and is actually producing a product that actually feeds what you're craving for, which is information, context, and analysis. I know that because you're here. In fact, give us a thumbs up while you're here right now, real fast, because you've been watching us for a while, and I know that you're entertained. All right, so let's break this down a bit, shall we? Because this deserves a little bit of a Larry, what do we call it? The Larry treatment?
The problem is that the right wing, hello, Scott, has taken advantage of this situation, I think.
The right wing has taken an advantage of the fact that the left-wing media has been caught in lies. We're taking advantage of the fact that you guys blew the biggest stories of the last 10 years. We're taking advantage of the fact that you got caught with your pants down lying about Russian collusion because your anonymous sources promised you it was real and it wasn't. And so you made it up because you didn't care, because all you focused on was destroying Trump. The right wing in this country is taking advantage of the fact that we have a mind of our own and we're not going to march like lemmings and vote for you who you tell us to vote for. And you hate us for that. That's who the right wing is taking advantage of. Well, shame on us.
Quite cleverly, quite wisely. They've played into a weakness.
What situation?
The situation of media being under attack. And so they've created a situation where
you've almost got it. Keep going. What the right wing is taking advantage of is finally the American people saying enough is enough. They're tired of feeling like the mass media screens out one viewpoint versus another in political coverage. They're tired of media institutions favoring one party over another. They're tired of narratives over factual stories. If I had any advice for 60 Minutes or anybody else, it would be just cover the news and try to be fair about it and stop putting your finger on the scale. Especially during
you're talking about the old mass media myth that you could have this thing that was in the middle. The Walter Cronkite saying, that's the way it is, when it wasn't for many Americans the way it was. When people were pissed off.
People back in those days trusted the media, didn't they? No,
they just couldn't be heard.
Now that's fascinating insight because he's a little bit correct there. Walter Cronkite would say that's the way it is. And most Americans did know that it wasn't the way it was because, well, as you know, Walter Cronkite was a screaming liberal Democrat. And he decided to lie about the Vietnam War and many other things going on in the country because he lived in Manhattan and wanted to be a part of the cool kids club. He's revealing quite a bit there. He's also revealing the idea that there's this myth of objectivity, that there's no such thing as objectivity, which I would agree with, actually. But that's actually not his full takeaway here. He's suggesting that the internet has changed things now. No, this has been true no matter what the medium is. The internet's changed one thing, and we'll get to that in a second. But the fact that reporters can use the cloak of objectivity to pretend like they don't have a dog in the fight, and yet they're actually pushing their political bias overtly or covertly through whether it's a newspaper or a radio or a television or a cable show or an internet show, that doesn't change whatever medium is being used. It's still the same old fraudulent behavior. Just ask Jake Tapper. He's got an office right down the hall from you there. But watch, there's more.
Because there was no two-way. Now we have the internet.
Look at the Gallup polling. It was here. And now it's here. It's fallen off of a cliff.
Yeah, we do have that Gallup polling about trust in media. And now, as in recent years, and let's be honest, Scott, a lot of this is driven by the rhetoric on your side of the aisle. I mean, it's not.
You think it's driven by the rhetoric and not the performance?
Absolutely.
That is an amazing moment when Abby Phillips calls out her colleague, Scott Jennings, for saying this is driven by the rhetoric on your side. Because here's what she's saying. Because you see through the lies. Because they get fact-checked and their lies are proven, because you know that they're lying to you, and now suddenly you call them out on it, and you tell the world that I'm not going to trust you anymore because CNN is full of shit, then it's your fault. It's your fault for realizing the facts. It's your fault for realizing the truth of the matter. You're the problem. Shut up. And just watch our ads so we can get paid more money, damn it. And then they transition to another part of the conversation.
The point is this. Yes. If you're CBS or any other news outlet, the reason that you have lost trust ought to be obvious to you, and the way to fix it also ought to be obvious to you, and it has nothing to do with Donald Trump and everything to do with the product. Just try to make a better product that appeals to more people. And the way you appeal to more people is by not crapping on half or more than half of the country because of their values and political viewpoints.
I think that is.
Thank you very much. And by the way, let's think about this for a minute. Fox News Channel. You may have mixed feelings about Fox News Channel. I have mixed feelings about Fox News Channel. But let's point out the fact that the Fox News Channel, when it originated in the early to mid 90s, and it was created by Roger Ailes, it had one basic idea. There's a huge percentage of Americans who get their news in a way that is offensive to them because stories that matter to them are ignored or they're lied about. Their elected officials are maligned and lied about, and they don't have equal time. This is right after Rush Limbaugh began his talk radio show, and he became a huge sensation because finally people said, oh, this guy is talking about stories and talking about in a way that relates better to me and doesn't offend me and treat me like an idiot. So Fox News starts, and they laughed at Fox News. Oh, they mocked Fox News. They made fun of Fox News. And now Fox News is dominant. They've been dominant for over 20 years. They've been dominant. They have absolutely blistered in prime time, regular fun daytime, mornings, special events. Fox News dominates. Now, these people are in a business. CNN, ABC, CBS, NBC, MSNBC, all of them. It's a business. Their business is to get ratings and to put on a show that attracts viewers who will then be appealing to the advertisers. And it's been almost 30 years since Fox News has dominated. And not once have any of those businesses said, hey, maybe they've got something over there. Maybe we should have one show, 2 shows, maybe a weekend show. Maybe we hire one person to host a show that appeals to that audience. And yet they never have. You watch CBS, NBC, ABC, they do their Sunday shows, right? This is a good gig to be a contributor on ABC News or NBC News. It's a great gig, man. You get paid a salary. You show up maybe on a special election night coverage or debate night coverage and do a primetime hit. And you show up like 2 Sundays a week, and it's good money, man. Trust me, everybody in town wants that gig. And they have the roundtable. It's like, you've heard the news, you've heard the interviews, and now our round panel discussion of experts. And those people, some of them are on the payroll. And they've got a couple of Democrats, and they've got usually one Republican. They've got several Democrats. Maybe they'll have one Republican. They'll have 10 Democrats. And if you're lucky, they'll have one Republican. But here's the thing about that Republican, if they're on the payroll, that paid Republican for those networks on that roundtable hates Trump. The one Republican they'll hire is going to be Chris Christie or Bill Kristol or Steve Hayes or Anna Navarro. Hey, we have our Republican. What do you want from us? That's equal time. It's been 10 years since Donald Trump went down the golden escalator, and these corporate geniuses still don't pay one person to represent the majority of Americans in this country, who also happens to represent the viewpoint of the President of the United States. They call themselves a serious political analyst show, and yet there's no one there on the payroll who represents the President and the majority of Americans. And after all this time, they still, you can't be stupid. You can't possibly be stupid in corporate media and last this long. This has to be a willful decision. They're not like, oh, geez, it never occurred to us. No. They willfully do this. They go out of their way. In fact, Jennings on CNN is the unicorn, and it's a new development. And let me tell you something. At CNN, they are freaking out about him. All right, one more.
What you'd end up with in that press room then is, and these are my words, the freak show that you had Trump wants.
All right, I'll leave it there. What is this guy in his 70s? Guy's in his 70s. Got white hair. He's got a goatee with no mustache. And he's wearing Dumbledore glasses. And he's screaming at me about a freak show. This guy's calling somebody else a freak. But that's CNN. That's CNN for you. Not only are they calling their media colleagues the freak show, but he's also calling their viewers freaks too. But that's par for the course for CNN. I mean, one other quick Jennings exchange here, which I loved, which is kind of tangentially related about the insular world that the left protects themselves in. The reason why you don't see a Republican, a pro-Trump Republican on any of those panel shows is because the producers and the network executives. They all live in Manhattan. They all want to go to the nice dinner parties in the Hamptons. They all have very rich friends who are all very liberal, and they don't want to show up and say, "Ew, why do you have that guy on your show?" And here's a perfect example of it. A conversation about how Bill Maher had dinner with Donald Trump and actually spoke rather positively about it. Larry David wrote a column in the New York Times called "My Dinner with Adolf." Watch the conversation.
And the message of this is not to, because Bill Maher, first of all, I totally agree. He's totally in the right to do it. And I loved his monologue. Even though I disagree with most everything he believes politically, he was right to do this and he was right to speak out about it. But this isn't about that dinner. It's about the next one, because this is the modern left. It's an attempt always to intimidate people into not ever doing it again. It's to silence yourselves, or we'll do it for you. That's the purpose of this op-ed, so that the next comedian or the next person on the American left chooses not to speak to Donald Trump. This is all an effort to get people not to do what you just said, which is to talk to each other and our political leaders.
That's 100% right. And I guarantee you, the person who runs CNN, the person who produces every show on CNN and every other television network that covers news and politics, they would much rather have dinner with Larry David than with Bill Maher. So there you have it. That's why we are where we are. And as my mentor and my friend, the dearly departed Andrew Breitbart, and that's his book, Righteous Indignation, as he famously said to the media, the American people don't hate you because you're biased. They hate you because you suck.